We have a power.
Right, everyone, welcome. Thank you for being here with us today. Dr. Sleeder, thank you so very much for being here with us today. We do want to acknowledge the land that we are on. We are in Pico Rivera, coming to you from Pico Rivera on Tongva land. And if anyone wants to type in the chat what indigenous territory you're on, please do so. It's important to acknowledge the First Nations, the First Peoples, the first caretakers of the land that we live on. So if you want to go ahead and type that into the chat, there we go. A lot of folks on Chumash territory. Beautiful, beautiful. So thank you for being with us today. The purpose of today's session is to talk about Trump's pushback on the 1619 project, things we can do about that, but also ethnic studies and where we are with ethnic studies in the state of California. And more importantly, what we can do collectively to make sure that we continue on this path to push for critical and culturally relevant education in every single classroom across the state of California and hopefully across the nation. So it's important for us to come together in this community dialogue. So because there's so many folks that are doing amazing work. And I think that we need to create more spaces and more opportunities for us to come together, put our heads together, put our resources together, put our ideas and visions together so that we can move this forward. Together we can accomplish anything. So thank you everybody for being here with us today, especially Dr. Christine Sleeder. Do you want to say anything?
No, just understand that we're all in this movement together, but we're all under attack, and we're also understanding where everything's happening in this place, in this time, in this space. In 2020, it's been an amazing year in terms of tragedies and events, but it's time to take all the negative and turn it into positive and turn it into some type of action, because we really need to take advantage of this time. I don't think there's going to be another time in this country in modern day history where we have an opportunity to push for some really progressive, out of the box thinking to really close the achievement gap and really make education truly equal for all of our students. So that's kind of what we're looking to push for. Let's go ahead and get started.
All right, y'all. So my name is Veronica Valadez, and this is my partner, Gabriel Orosco. We are co-founders of Ehecatl Wind Philosophies. We help school districts establish sustainable and dynamic ethnic studies programs, and we also do implicit bias training, anti-racist work within education and even the nonprofit and business sectors. So that's who we are in a nutshell. And I would love to introduce Dr. Christine Sleeder, give you a little background on her. So Dr. Christine Sleeder is a professor emerita at the College of Education of California State University, Monterey Bay, where she was a founding faculty member. She has published over 150 articles and 24 books, including Transformative Ethnic Studies in Schools with Miguel Zavala and Teachers College Press. Dr. Christine Sleeder's research focuses on ethnic studies, anti-racist multicultural education, and teacher education. In 2010, she was commissioned by the National Education Association to review research on the impact of ethnic studies on students. Her publication, The Academic and Social Value of Ethnic Studies, has been widely used in advocacy for ethnic studies policies. That review has been updated in her most recent book, Transformative Ethnic Studies in Schools, which also includes portraits of ethnic studies curriculum and teachers, and discussions with ethnic studies researchers and activists about how research can inform policy. Welcome, Dr. Sleeder.
Thank you so much. And it's a real honor to be invited to join you here this afternoon. Veronica contacted me in relationship to a statement that I helped author that was entitled Educating for Democracy, Demands Educating Against White Supremacy. And I'm going to do a little screen share here so that you can just briefly see it. Now let's see. Okay, you don't want to see my email. Oh dear. Okay, how do I get to? Oh, I thought I was just so cool and had this all figured out. Okay, can you see us? Yeah. Yeah, okay, I'm in the right place. No, I'm actually not in the right place. Okay, hang on a sec. Okay, this is the statement. And if you would like to sign it, the easiest way to find it is to go to my Facebook page and just scroll down until you see the links to it. But I'll give you a little bit of a background about the statement, why we wrote it, and then kind of shift to some of the updates that I've done on the research on the impact of ethnic studies. This statement here grew from the work of a network of scholar collectives. And the one I am a member of is called CARE, the California Alliance of Researchers for Equity in Education. These scholar collectives, there are 7 of them right now, and we've met a couple of times, most recently, just last weekend. It seems like so much has happened in the last week because this statement grew out of the discussion that we were having. But the scholar networks are groups of scholars. Actually, one of you mentioned being interested in decolonizing math, and one of them is called Radical STEM. And they would love it if you wanted to join them, because they have the questions, but they don't really have the answers. But the scholar collectives are people in higher education who view our research and just kind of the work we do as scholarship is something that can be very useful for advocacy of work that's going on the ground. What prompted this particular statement this last weekend when we were meeting on Zoom over a 2-day period for a total of about 5 hours, toward the end, we got to talking about some core issues that all of us were grappling with. And a lot of it came out of Trump's attacks on diversity in a variety of ways, when he was saying that no longer can we have trainings in anything funded by the federal government that mention white privilege or critical race theory. The attacks on the Zinn Education Project, the attacks on the 1619 Project. And I keep expecting to see ethnic studies in his crosshairs. It's not yet because I don't think he knows about it. But once he finds out about it, I'm sure it will be. But you've all seen the attacks and how he calls these things anti-American and divisive, and is calling for a pro-American unity curriculum in which the heroes would be mostly white. And you can easily figure that out by the people who he calls are the heroes who should be elevated. And as we were talking about this, we were saying that this is really an assertion of white supremacy, and we need to call it what it is. It's not just throwing darts at some things that we believe in, but it's part of a larger project of reasserting white supremacy. And we had a number of concerns that led to us very quickly putting this statement together and then trying to get as many endorsers as possible. One of them is that and I'm sure all of you agree with this and sort of see this, that democracy itself right now is under attack as the United States is moving in the direction of really a dictatorship or a fascist state. And that is evident in a variety of ways, certainly through voter suppression, through polarization, and Trump really throwing gasoline on the fire rather than trying to figure out how to bring people together, through his constant discrediting of the news media, and lately has stepped up trying to discredit the legitimacy of the upcoming election, and the legitimacy of voting by mail, and now saying that if he's not the candidate, then it's a rigged election and it's an illegitimate election. His constant dismissal of facts of any sort, and dismissal of the rule of law. And he constantly does things where he kind of skirts around what the normal procedures would be, or just simply ignores them altogether, and kind of dares people to stop him, which the Republicans then don't stop him. So he constantly just keeps pushing harder. So we decided that one of the things that we need to do is very overtly affirm the value of a participatory democracy. And the participatory democracy in the US certainly isn't perfect, certainly doesn't work. Let's see, I can get out of screen share here. Certainly doesn't work perfectly at all, but it's certainly much better than the direction of what we're moving in. A second principle that we agreed on and agreed needs to be stated often is that education is a right. It's a human right. It's not a commodity, and it can't be treated as a commodity. And increasingly, we do treat education as a commodity when we frame it in terms of you kind of get what your community can pay for. If we frame education as a right, that every child has a right to a quality education, then we need to be pushing toward funding formulas that fund education well for everybody. And we were mentioning in the discussion before this started how the disparities are glaringly more obvious than they were before COVID. And I've thought about how if education were viewed as a right that you fund for everybody, then we wouldn't have kids who right now can't access education. We have this, we're in a moment now where we have wealthy parents forming their own little school pods where they're hiring teachers to teach their kids, and kids in poor communities where the parents can't afford to do that. Some cases just not able to access education at all. And that is wrong. Education is necessary for a participatory democracy. And this is something that John Dewey had written about beautifully a long time ago, and it's still very relevant. And so we need to frame education as one of the building blocks of a participatory education and participatory democracy. And what that means is that racism, white supremacy, other forms of exploitation need to be opened up for discussion rather than closed off for discussion. Participatory democracy doesn't entail silencing. It entails learning how to listen and learn across our differences so that we can actually hear each other and work together on solving issues that all of us face. I also, we also, and this sort of relates to my work in general, that research supports a positive impact of, I always like to look at what does the research say. Research supports the positive impact of the kinds of things that Trump is trying to ban. I just this last week wrote a piece that I sent off to the Biden-Harris campaign, and who knows whether it'll get used or if it'll get sort of lost in the ether. But reviewing the research on the impact of education for ethnic studies, diversity training in the workplace, and they all come to the same conclusion that it makes a positive impact on people, and that the aims aren't divisive aims, but the aims are rather, this was articulated really well in some work that was done in relationship to higher education by Patricia Gurin at Harvard and some of the folks that she was working with. But in learning to take the perspective of somebody whose background is different from yourself, learning to act in inclusive kinds of ways, developing communication across groups, developing a willingness to listen and to learn about people who are different from yourself. And those are aims that are aims that we should be for rather than against. So anyway, in the thing that I wrote to the Biden-Harris campaign, I'm like, tell Joe Biden to say this, and as a way of countering. And then just one more thing, this wasn't actually what we talked about, but it was one of the things that I was thinking about as I was helping to write the statement, is that the whole idea of people of color's anger being prompted by Marxist radicals is so like off the wall in a lot of ways. Just one of them, anybody who's read Marx knows that Marx didn't write about racism. So if you want a critique of racism, you actually don't go to a Marxist scholar, because Marx critiqued capitalism, but not racism. But the bigger issue is that it just simply denies the fact that kids experience racism every day and bring into the school as they get older a consciousness of what they're experiencing every day. and welcome a curriculum that helps them name and analyze those experiences. And so it's not like teachers are foisting ideas on kids. Teachers are helping kids learn to analyze the experiences that they're already having. So in this statement, which I'm not going to read, I encourage you to just go to my Facebook page, find it, read it. I mean, I can read it, but then that takes away from discussion time. But it argues why we need a race-conscious curriculum. And it talks about the fact that there's a long history to the condemnation of a race-conscious curriculum. Relatively recently in my own lifetime, I remember the beginnings of ethnic studies through the movements of the Third World Liberation Front and others during the late 1960s and early 1970s. And I became a classroom teacher in the early 1970s. And I remember watching the growth of ethnic studies at the higher ed level and multicultural education, which grew out of ethnic studies initially at the K-12 level. And then in the late 1980s, this very well orchestrated, organized attack that was very well funded by the right through rightist think tanks, in which books, newspaper articles, op-eds, magazine articles came out trying to discredit all of this work. And so when I look at what's happening now, it's kind of like, oh, that all over again. Oh, so far the books and the various op-eds and stuff, we don't have quite as orchestrated of an attack yet, but I think that may well come. The statement itself has been endorsed so far by 61 organizations and over 1,600 people. Kevin Kumashiro is the person who's in charge of it, and I'm not entirely clear where he's going to send it, but he wanted it to be well supported when it does get sent off. I mentioned earlier that I come at these issues not only as an advocate and as somebody who had been teaching. I was a special ed teacher at the high school level and then teaching at the university level for years and years and years, and I'm retired now. But I also come as a researcher. And I think that coming at the issues as a researcher is a real helpful way to advocate for things. Because I always like to start with the question, what does the research say? Just as an aside, I asked that question, I'm going to go back to screen share here. I asked that question, oh, if I know how to do that. Yeah, I asked that question when this last May, when I saw my grandson struggling with school post-COVID. And I was like, okay, I need to look at what the research says about online learning. So CareEd organized ourselves, we wrote a research brief, and I encourage people to read it because the research around the impact of online learning on kids, it's like you would not want to go there if you knew how bad the research, I mean, the research really is like, it's if you care about student learning, that's not the direction you would go. Veronica mentioned the NEA report and my updating of it. So I would like to shift to, let's see. Yeah, shift to that updating of what the research says about the impact of ethnic studies. And I mentioned on email to Veronica and Gabriel that I would be happy to share these PowerPoint slides. Actually, I was going to email them to you right before, and then I got sidetracked with something else, but it's all ready to stick in email because this isn't private. I don't own this. I'd like people, if using the PowerPoint slides is helpful in your advocacy, please use them. But I'll just kind of summarize what's here. When I was looking at the research on the impact of ethnic studies, I divided it into two piles. One pile looked at the impact of ethnic studies on students of color. And the other pile looked at the impact of ethnic studies on diverse student populations that include white students. And how they were looking at them was rather different. So it made sense to divide it into the two piles. So I'm mostly going to be concentrating on the impact of ethnic studies on students of color. And I've broken that out into 3 or 4 different piles, depending on what outcome they were looking at. But most of the research has looked at the relationship between ethnic studies and student achievement. And this is really, really helpful in advocacy, because when I've presented this material to school boards and administrators, this is what people it's like, oh, really kind of pay attention to. This slide plus the next one, let's see. Yeah, plus the next one, summarize the studies that are out there now, or at least were out there as of about a year ago, that have looked at the impact of ethnic studies on student achievement. That I've organized them by the kind of curriculum. So you can see San Francisco Unified Ethnic Studies 9th grade program. Tucson.
Dr. Sleeder, we're not seeing your slides.
No?
No, you need to change what you're sharing. We're seeing your web page right now.
Oh
So
dear.
you,
I'm saying, okay, let me stop share.
yes.
I felt it was too important to miss, so sorry for the interruption.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Dr. Flores.
Okay, now let me find, oh. Can you now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So you can see the San Francisco Unified Ethnic Studies, Tucson's Mexican American program, Math in a Cultural Context, which is an Alaska program. And I won't read them, but what the curriculum is, the grade level, and you can see that the grade levels vary widely, what kind of research design was used, and what the outcome measures were that were looked at. And one of the points that I try to make when I'm talking with people, the 2 studies that have actually been of all of this work here, looking at the impact of ethnic studies on students of color, the 2 studies that have been, I think, the most methodologically rigorous are the top 2 here, the D and Penner evaluation of San Francisco Unified Ethnic Studies and the Cabrera et al. Research on the Tucson Unified Mexican American Studies program. And I tell people, if you want to get the kinds of outcomes they got, which was increased GPA, increased attendance, credits toward graduation in San Francisco, and increased standardized test scores on reading, writing, and math, which, you know, for ethnic studies, there's a lot else that we're looking at. But if you want to get those, and this is what I tell administrators, these programs were not kumbaya type ethnic studies. These were programs that looked very rigorously at analyzing racism, capitalism, other forms of oppression, engaging students in learning how to work for social change through collective means. And if that is uncomfortable to you, go with it anyway, because that's what engages the kids and leads to the kinds of positive outcomes here. And so I think as people are grappling with what do we mean by ethnic studies and what are the teachers going to be able to go along with, that's a very important point to make. Of the studies looking at the relationship between ethnic studies curriculum and student achievement, all of them except one, and let me see if I can get to, can you see the second page? Yeah, okay. All except one by Sean Ginwright reported a positive outcome. The one that didn't was a study that he did of a high school in Oakland that infused Afrocentrism through the curriculum. And the problem that, and this is an important problem that he raised in it, is that you need to pay attention to where the kids are coming from. In this case, it was middle-class African-Americans who organized the curriculum for working-class kids whose understanding of Black culture was formed more kind of in the streets rather than in where middle-class people go. And if you engage kids in helping to make some decisions, kids and their families, you're going to be more likely to actually engage the kids when the curriculum is rolled out. that didn't happen in Oakland, and it should have. Okay, the second way of looking at the impact of ethnic studies curriculum, I looked here at asset-based pedagogies, which is more, the emphasis more on like culturally relevant pedagogy and less on the curriculum, but the same kinds of outcomes and the same kinds of consistently positive findings. This slide looked at the relationship between ethnic studies curriculum and student identity or sense of self. And again, you can see the names of the programs, the levels, mostly 8th grade on up, the research design, the outcomes. And only one of the studies, the one that's highlighted here in the salmon colored, did not find a positive outcome, which was kind of interesting because it was a study of the same program right above it that did find a positive outcome. So the researchers weren't sure what was up with that. The studies that look at the impact of ethnic studies, I'm getting this sunlight that's coming in like on me that wasn't there. And so you can probably see my chin, but not my eyes. But anyway, where am I? The studies that looked at the impact of ethnic studies on diverse student populations that include white students generally look at cross-racial attitudes and perspectives. And there's been actually tons of this research. I didn't do slides enumerating all of the studies. There's been so much research, mostly at the university level, and reviews of research. And basically what they find is that students who have taken an ethnic studies course or a women's studies course, in most cases, that makes a positive impact on students' attitudes about race. In some cases, there's no difference. In some cases, it makes a negative difference, but at most of the time, it makes a positive impact. When there's cross-group interaction as a part of the coursework, that tends to strengthen the positive impact. The impact tends to be greater on white students than on students of color, mostly because this stuff is new for white students and it's less new for students of color. And white students often struggle with it initially, and that's where you get a lot of the white pushback, is when it's uncomfortable emotionally. But students who stick with it learn and grow. And then instruction that takes into account students' actual questions is more powerful than instruction that doesn't. So that's basically what the research says. And that's the main tools that I use when I'm advocating for ethnic studies. So I think we can open it up for discussion.
Actually, if Gabriel and I are going to go over a couple more points with you all, and then we'll definitely open it up for discussion. If you have questions, and I would like to take a poll from everyone to see if you want to have an open discussion together or if you want to go into breakout rooms in a little bit, but we'll get to that point in just a sec. Dr. Sleeder, can I have you unshare your screen so I can share my screen?
Oh, yes.
Thank you so much for that. Let's see, I'm make sure, where's my screen at? There it is.
Thank you, Dr. Sleeder.
Okay, folks. Let's see. I'm trying to make this into, oh, here we go. Okay, folks, so just, and Dr. Sleeder did cover a lot of this, but we do want to just make sure that everyone has the background information to this so you understand what we're dealing with. So in case you don't already know, on September 17th, Trump announced the creation of the 1776 Commission to promote patriotic education in a direct response to the New York Times 1619 Project, a Pulitzer Prize winning project that traces the history and legacy of slavery in the United States. So this is a pushback to that. In establishing the 1776 Commission, Trump vows to encourage our educators to teach our children about the miracle of American history and promises that our heroes will never be forgotten. Our youth will be taught to love America with all of their heart and all of their soul. So I think that there's a, this rhetoric going around that really is pushing back on anything that is critical or culturally relevant or includes marginalized voices, and that if it has anything to do with that, then it's unpatriotic in some way, right? Which we all know is not true. The goal is to undo any progress that has been made that examines US history through a critical lens that includes multiple perspectives, while also being inclusive of the stories, triumphs, contributions of the BIPOC community and barriers of institutional and structural racism marginalized communities have and continue to face. So it's really an attempt to erase that institutional and structural racism has existed and continues to exist. In today's education, oftentimes we teach about racism as if it were only in the past, and that we have progressed so much so that racism doesn't really exist anymore, and that our circumstances are created only by ourselves. And so we need to make sure that today's education continues to teach about past racist practices, but also, more importantly, what's happening right now within our institutions and in our society. And so, as Dr. Sleeder had stated, and this is just in a very simple general way, what are the dangers of Eurocentric education? It ignores the existence of institutionalized and structural racism of the past and mostly of the present. BIPOC students don't see themselves represented in the curriculum and become disconnected from schooling, which leads to the lack of positive self-development, affecting their ability to do well in school, socially, and academically. The lack of representation and truth about institutional and structural racism feeds into the racism that is already deeply ingrained in our society, which ultimately leads to violence against BIPOC communities. And we see this with over-policing and police brutality as just a very small, some examples, but there are various. And then this is going to be.
So just to try to encapsulate what's happening with ethics studies, this is a statement from okay, I'm switching computers here, from Luis Alejo. So it was originally written AB 331 by Jose Medina. Democrat Riverside would have made ethics studies a high school graduation requirement by 2024-25 school year. This would have given school districts enough time to ramp up implementation over a 4-year period. It also included the funding, which is a key component of any policymaking, needed to get the bill off the ground. The bill, however, came under controversy last summer when the first draft of the state model high school curriculum on ethics studies was released pursuant to the legislation. And one of the contingencies was that the model curriculum had to be developed before it became a graduation requirement. Was released to the legislation, and Luis Alejo authored. AB 331 was then intentionally parked in the Senate Appropriations Committee's suspense file to allow revisions of the curriculum. Technical difficulties. Wow. Okay. So, on August 20th, the Senate Appropriations Committee held its hearing on the bill and announced its approval. Several amendments, which were slipped under Medina's approval as author's amendments. The bill was put in print in its final form on August 28th with these amendments, which made it so that the bill be defunded and the implementation of the graduation requirement would be delayed a full decade all the way to 2030. And the opportunity to save AB 30 was now gone as the deadline to amend the bill is passed. Governor Newsom has until September 30th to sign and pass this defunded and weak bill. Luis Alejo expresses the importance of urging the governor and the legislature to do justice to this long-awaited bill by properly funding it into next year's budget and restoring its original implementation date so that our students don't have to wait a full decade to benefit from it. And so, as you know, the model curriculum was under attack, and apparently one of the caucuses, and I believe it was the Jewish caucus, that had a lot of issues with some of the dialogue and curriculum that was centered around, understanding Muslims, and the Holocaust wasn't necessarily a part of it. And the reason why, because I know some of the people on the instructional committee, is because it's already part of the regular curriculum. You know, we already know about the Holocaust. So because of that, and there was a big pushback, and I know many of you are aware of it, that's where we're at as of today. And so if this bill passes, it won't be funded like it needs to be. And anybody who understands policymaking, and I'm also a policymaker, is that if you don't provide training, you don't provide professional development, and you don't fund, particularly you don't fund a bill, then it's really just a symbolic gesture, and it doesn't carry the weight that it should. So we wanted to share this because Rialto Unified passed a resolution that declared racism as a public health crisis. So Rialto Board of Education, and we're going to give props to them. We want to pay our homage to them. Very good, Rialto. That racism and oppression have dramatically affected Black Americans who have experienced more than 400 years of slavery, genocide, poverty, and forced relocation. Racism and its effects continue to contribute to intergenerational trauma in millions of citizens in the state of California. It can be seen in our education system that refuses to acknowledge America's attempt to erase indigenous land and cultures, in our medical system that historically and repeatedly fails Black women, and in our law enforcement that has its roots embedded in the enslavement of Black individuals. So I will put the link to the specific resolution that was passed on September 26th by Rialto, but the importance of this piece of legislation by the board is if you put professional development in there, it protects programs like ethnic studies. Because as you know, because of COVID and what's happening, you're going to be hearing a lot about budget cuts. So what's the first thing they're going to want to cut? They want to cut all the extras. And we want to make sure that if we have ethnic studies and we have our programs for us, that they need to be funded and they can't be the first thing that are cut. It has to have importance, and it has to have relevance, and it has to be a priority for school districts. So passing a resolution such as this makes it a priority. So we wanted to share that information with you as well. Yeah, turn to the next one. So, yeah, just go ahead.
Okay. All right. So at this point, what we originally had planned was how to have the community dialogue in this space so that we can talk about what spaces we each occupy and figure out how we can fight back in those spaces, right? With positive, revolutionary ways, put that into praxis. And we have to really think about practical and impactful practices and implementation of the work that we do so that we can push back. So far, as Dr. Sleeder mentioned, we've had a number of school districts already implement ethnic studies as a graduation requirement. Meanwhile, there's all this back and forth going on with these assembly bills. So what that tells us is that we don't have to wait for a bill to pass in order to implement the necessary work that has to take place for our children. We don't have to wait for that. So we can use whatever resources we have in the spaces that we work in to push this forward. And then also, how can we come together to create a collective and effective pushback? Or it doesn't always have to be looking at it from a negative perspective. It doesn't have to be a pushback. It's just, we are moving forward with this. It doesn't necessarily have to push back on anything if you don't want to look at it that way, but we just need to, we understand now what is good for students. And there's evidence, there's research, there's data that supports that. And so we need to do what's best for students. It needs to be student-centered. And in this state, in the state of California, the vast majority of students are students of color. So how are we serving them? How are we closing the equity gap, the opportunity gap? What are we doing in the spaces that we are in to close those gaps? And so I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing so I can see all of you. All right, here we are. So I'm gonna pose this question to you all. We can have a short Q&A right now, but I think I would really love to send you all off into breakout rooms just to have, so that you can all have a conversation about what you can do in the spaces in which you take up space, right? to see what you can do together, and also collectively. So I would like for that to happen as well. So are you all okay with just having maybe like a 5 to 10 minute Q&A, go off into breakout rooms with those questions, and then come back and have a discussion again? How does that sound? I'm seeing nods. And okay, awesome. So let's go ahead and open that up to any Q&A, and it is 4:46 right now, so we can do a Q&A up until 4:55. Okay. So I'm opening it up to all of you, anyone who wants to ask a question or make a comment.
I'll jump in. I didn't get to introduce myself earlier. I'm Dan Meitzel with the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, Santa Barbara and Tri-Counties. And I wanted to go back to a comment that you made at the very beginning about education as a right, because I thought that was kind of a wonderful premise to start from, and I couldn't agree more. I just want to point out that the ultimate arbiter in our system of what a right is, at least from the legal perspective, is the courts. And I know that the argument has been made and so far turned down that education is a right. And it's been tried both as a right, and then the other argument that has been made is that the disproportionate funding that's occurring everywhere with gerrymandered districts is an equal protection violation. And the courts have struck that down, or they've rejected that argument. And so I just wanted to point out kind of the obstacle we have with the current, it's not the court system, it's who's in the court system making these decisions. But we need to figure out some strategy to get that argument further and around the courts or through them, because it's being rejected soundly so far. I just wanted your thoughts on that as to how we can pursue that advocacy given the law that's out there.
Yeah. I mean, what you're saying is how the process works. But I think that I'm not sure that we spend a lot of time talking about education as a right. We're actually starting to talk about the possibility of healthcare as a right. And I think with public pressure, that's where some of these changes finally come, is if enough people get on board, if we talk about it and there's enough of a groundswell. In countries that have healthcare systems for everybody, they've gotten past talking about, is healthcare a right for everyone or not? They worked through that and decided that it is. And we haven't done that. And at least getting the issue on the table, talked about, and pushed for, I think is probably the way to start.
Hi, I'm Arnett Duncan, formerly with the Rialto School District. Have there been serious discussions about ideas that go outside of the traditional structures? Everything seems to be geared toward the public schools, trying to get legislation, and those things are extremely important and need to be done. But I mean, we're talking about something that's been bandied about for decades, and clearly they're trying to tie it up for decades more. In the meantime, while those official avenues are being addressed, is there discussion about what we can do outside of the formal system in our community that can advance the education of our children, which is something that can't wait another 5 minutes?
That's a great point, Dr. Duncan. And like we said earlier, we don't have to wait for any kind of legislation to come through. We have to think about ways that we can make this happen in the spaces in which we're in. One thing that I'm doing, and this is easier for me because I teach at the university level. I know that this isn't really possible K through 12 probably, but what I'm doing is that I joined, I followed the example of Melina Abdullah from Cal State LA and Black Lives Matters, who she is streaming her classes live on Facebook, her Black Power class live on Facebook, in order to democratize and make education accessible to the masses, right? Because these are conversations that we need to have in as many spaces as possible. And a lot of people don't have access to school campuses or money to enroll in such classes. And so what I'm doing is I'm doing the exact same thing. I'm airing my classes Mondays and Wednesdays on Facebook, and it's Chicano Studies. And I have a whole list of amazing guest speakers, because this is about sharing space and sharing knowledge. And this is about our collective work, right? It's not about creating a platform for myself at all whatsoever. It's I put the word out, like, does anybody want to guest speak for my class? And I had over 50 people ask, volunteer to speak for my classes, which is a beautiful contribution to the learning experiences of my students. And then once we had the conversation about our efforts to collectively put our agency into work and make this available to everyone, we record them, they're on our YouTube channels, they're going live on my Facebook page, and all the students are fine with it. They're happy to do it. All the guest speakers are happy to do it. And so that's one small way in which I'm trying my best to participate in this #Freedom Campus movement to make this education available to everyone. So we have to just find really creative ways to do things like that. But so we can keep that conversation going to see what else y'all can do in K through 12 to make that accessible.
And like Dr. Duncan said, like, we got to think out of the box, right? So I used to work in the city of Arcadia, and I know that the Chinese, they went to school 6 days a week, and so they had schools on Saturdays and sometimes schooling on Sundays, which is tutoring. And so the point I'm trying to make is, we as public school educators, we can't do that, but we can create different spaces in different places for our communities, right? And then the other piece is, many of us see the big global picture. There was a Save Ethnic Studies. That was a big movement, and that actually pushed this discussion. So it's become a statewide movement, right? And that's a great thing. But what I've noticed is a lot of the local districts, they haven't really jumped on board. And so what I'm trying to say is, like, at the local community, at the local level, that's where, in your backyard, is where there needs to be more of a groundswell, right? Because on the big level, we have all of our statewide ethnic studies educators and all of us that are supportive, and we're huge in that realm. But when you go back into your own community, how many of us are there really, right? There may be a handful. So we gotta somehow capture that big movement and put it in our cities, right? And the best way to do that as educators is to educate our students about it as well in the movement to get to their parents.
Does anyone else have any questions for Dr. Sleeder? Or comments?
I have a question, Veronica.
Go ahead.
Dr. Sleeder, I really appreciate you reminding us of the importance of research, right? Because we have the fortune of being able to back up what we say, with research, and not just it being our opinion. And my question is, I recently filed to be a board member. I'm actually going to be a board member beginning in December at the elementary school level. And I think that's a part of the work that we need to do, right? Is I'm inspired by the people of color, the women that are running for office. And so we need to stop complaining about bad leadership and becoming the leaders ourselves, right? So my question to you is, since I'm going to try to advocate for ethnic studies at the elementary school level, I think I'm going to need some more of that research, right? And it was good to see some of that research there. So I would love to figure out, like, how to get that information so that when I get to the board, I can begin to present this research, or have folks like you come in, or other things like that to justify it, because we know that there's going to be the questioning and wanting to not support this work. So I'm wondering if you know of effective ways that this research could be brought to, like, elementary schools, so that we can begin to.
Yeah, that's a good question, because a lot of people aren't really sure what it even means at the elementary school level. I'm grabbing a book here. This is Ethnic Studies at the preschool or early grades level by Ruchi Rangnath at University of San Francisco. It's case studies of teachers. It's actually teachers writing about their own practice. So it doesn't have the data of the impact on kids, but it does have really good portraits of what teachers can do. And I think that's a real good start. There isn't that much research that, like on the charts that I was showing, although a few of the studies do have elementary level, but most of them are secondary level. But I think Ruchi's book is actually a real good place to start.
Thank you.
I also, actually, any of you who are working in higher ed, if you have students who are looking for research projects documenting the impact of ethnic studies on kids, even though there's quite a bit of research, we need more. And like in relationship to Ricardo's question, targeted at the elementary level would be a great contribution.
I was thinking, Dr. Sleeder, when you were talking, it came to me, research on books of people of color at the elementary level, and their impact on students' reading interest.
Yep.
That just kind of came to me, right?
Yep.
So,
Yep.
so for students of color at the elementary level, let's just say like Gary Soto, Sandra Cisneros, artists like that, what's the impact of those books being part of the curriculum in terms of interest of reading for students of color? And then you could track the reading levels of those students. That's just something that came to me while you were talking, but that's a good place to research. And then at the elementary school level, because I used to teach 5th grade, there's US history that's all over colonialism. That's all 5th grade history is about. And you can really infuse a lot of great things with the US history, at least in 5th grade. So it can be done at the elementary level, and Veronica and I are all working on some of those pieces with a few school districts. But that's just an idea.
I have a question, Ken and Diana. Integrating the curriculum that you're speaking of, I was at all the levels. And what I am curious about is at the elementary level, for instance, getting approval, and you do have to get some sort of approval, it seems to me, in order to be able to use that curriculum at the elementary level or at any level. So would it not be possibly a good idea to address the school boards? Because school boards really have a decision to make on whether programs and curriculum can be implemented, if I'm not mistaken. And I've worked with school boards over the years. And in fact, that's one of the negatives, is that most often school boards, excuse my language, but they don't know what the hell they're doing. And so, but nevertheless, you have to go through them. And so it seems to me that that would also be a journey or a direction that needs to be taken while also doing the other, because they have the decision-making power, whether that curriculum will be implemented or not. And so, whether it's through the California School Boards Association, through the California Latino School Boards Association, I've worked with a few of them. And so, I would recommend, or not recommend, I would suggest that that might be something to consider. If you've not already done that, you may have already done that.
Can I offer just a brief response? When I'm working with teachers, what I usually suggest is that they take the curriculum standards, because they do have to teach to those, figure out how to teach the standards in a way that's culturally relevant to the kids who they're working with. And then, if at all possible, pay attention to student achievement over time as they're teaching. And sort of do that before they go asking for permission. As an example is one of my former students who's the bilingual teacher in Salinas now, in Alisal, gets really good achievement from the kids. And she does it by actually not doing what the principal tells her to do. But she can document what she's doing and why she's doing it and the impact on kids. And the principal looks at the achievement scores that she's getting out of the kids. And it's actually turned her into a professional developer for the school.
Right, and I understand, I've spoken at Alisal, and that works for tenured teachers.
Yeah.
That won't work for non-tenured teachers because they also have a probationary plan that they need to stick with. And I just, because, you know, I was an elementary principal and middle school principal and a high school counselor. And so I understand that the tenured instructors can do it, but I would never put a non-tenured teacher in that position because it endangers their future. But I understand it if it can be done, especially if the non-tenured teacher is really good.
That's a great idea and another possibility. I do want to also share with you all that in case you haven't already heard, the State Superintendent Tony Thurmond announced yesterday or the day before, you know, that he's also pushing back on Trump right now. And he's pushing for anti-racist education in our schools and allotting $200,000 for every school district to implement anti-racist education. So, you know, we have some wins and we have some losses. This is a step in the right direction. So for any of you that are working in school districts, you know, just keep an eye out for that to bring in that training. And I also want to say that it's very, very important. I think oftentimes school boards or school districts who are thinking about implementing ethnic studies oftentimes go for the curriculum first. And they say, well, where's the curriculum? We just needed to get our hands on the curriculum, give it to the teachers and everything will be fine. And that is not the case. That is not the case. There has to be a lot of training that goes into this so that there is a paradigm shift and there is a lot of really focusing on the development of critical consciousness of the educators and understanding the educators have to be trained in implicit bias even within the classroom, right? And their positionality in the classroom. And really most teachers do not have a background in ethnic studies, do not have an understanding of how to ingrain the concepts of social justice and agency in the classroom for high school students and how they as ethnic studies teachers have to lead by example, right? So there goes a lot goes into implementing ethnic studies at the district level. It is not just about handing folks a curriculum. And more importantly, it's even better when we teach our teachers how to create that curriculum, right? That's what makes it sustainable and it should be aligned obviously with the standards. I'm going to ask Liliana Guarubias, who is one of the amazing teachers at Rialto, to maybe speak on that a little bit because Liliana is a seasoned teacher. She is an expert teacher, an amazing educator, and she did go through our training program. And if you want to just speak to that, because you did receive so much education over the years, but this was different for you. And can you just share a little bit about that and why it's important for teachers?
And she's an AP teacher. She's been an AP teacher for many years as well. That's good to know.
Yes, thank you, Veronica. Yeah, I am an AP government teacher and the ethnic and social justice studies teacher at Rialto High School. And the training is just amazing. The paradigm shift, the fact that you have to learn to teach the curriculum with fidelity because being an ethnic and social justice studies teacher creates a lot of obstacles to a certain extent. From pushback from teachers, from your own colleagues, to a certain extent, parents that are not used to their children coming home and talking about LGBTQ the history. So a lot of social justice, feminism. So there's a lot of that you need to know how to deal with. And I can't imagine teaching this class without having gone through the proper training with Veronica and Gabriel and the group, a group of us. I feel a lot more prepared to deal with these issues, and just developing the curriculum has given me a very clear understanding of the outcomes for this course. And, as I teach this course, it's purposeful, it's meaningful, because I know what the end result has to be. And I could not have done it without, the training that I received. And I am, very blessed to have worked with you guys and to have a district that enabled us to spend countless hours on the curriculum and just going through the training, and that mindset, that developing that ethnic lens that you need to teach the course.
Thank you, Liliana. Liliana went to one of our trainings. And so just understand, like, getting ethnic studies as a graduation requirement is just the first step. There are multiple layers to this. And as I've seen some people put on the chat, it's privately to me, it's like, this is very complex. Everything touches each other, local school boards, funding, all these other things. So we have to figure out a way where we can be most strategic and most effective in our areas, and then come together as a larger group. But it's not, the change is not going to happen if we don't fund it and we don't properly train our teachers to look at themselves, look at their own biases, their own positionality in the classrooms. And then you have to understand that all the ethnic studies teachers that are in the classrooms at the public school level, they have to deal with their colleagues. They have to deal with their colleagues who have no understanding of what they're doing. They only hear things. And so the conversations in the lunchroom, the conversations after school, before school, those are important conversations. And you have to have educators that can have those conversations and to provide that pedagogy as well. So all these components is what makes the program successful. And I think if we simplify it too much, then we're doing it an injustice in itself. We must understand it's multifaceted in pushing for this type of legislation, what we're doing.
Okay, folks, go.
I have a quick question, just really quick. Dr. Sleeder, how would you approach, because I've been teaching Chicano studies for 10 years and I get pushback from all kinds of folks. And I am the ethnic studies department, right? I'm the only one in our district that teaches an ethnic studies course. And now our assistant superintendent is now considering ethnic studies because of the bill. So like, how would you, what would you say I do? Like when I talk to them, we're going to be having a meeting really soon. I had a doctoral student that did research in my class 3 years ago. Like what would you say would be the starting point? Like when we implement this, like, would it be 9th grade? I have a vision of where I think it should go and where it should start, but I'm just curious, what would you, once I start having these conversations with folks at the district level, like how should I approach this? I'm just curious, what would you say?
Well, I actually think the whole curriculum needs to be reworked through an ethnic studies perspective. K-12, all the subject areas. That would actually be my ultimate vision. Short of that, short of that, I think it actually depends on where you are and the school district you're in, the location you are, and what doable. I know 9th grade is where California basically starts, because the 9th grade social studies curriculum doesn't have a specific, you got to teach this. So that's a relatively easy place to start. And that might be the best place to start for that reason. But something that I do with, I'm retired now, so I haven't taught a course for a while, but I do when I was teaching courses for my students and for people in the administration program is to, people would often ask, would say stuff like, well, if you look at the history textbook, it's already pretty diverse. Not if you go through and start counting the people who are there. And so I have people analyze the curriculum for the regular classes, just go through and count pictures, references to people, and see who's actually there and who isn't there. And then what impact that has on kids from communities that basically aren't represented in the curriculum. And for a lot of people, that's like they hadn't thought about that before. I don't know if that's addressing your question.
No, that does. Thank you. It's a really, thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, folks, so I want to use the next 6 or 7 minutes to send you off into breakout rooms. And so you have a little bit of time. So just be really intentional with your time and to share what we can do about moving this forward, right? What can we all do in the spaces that we share, and what can we do individually and collectively, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and send you out. You'll probably be in groups of 4. So let me do that, and you'll have about 7 minutes. Okay, here we go. We'll see you in a bit. Where am I?
Let me know if there's feedback. We're in the same
Hi,
room.
Michael. I am going to I'm going to try to see if I can put you into another room. So just give me a second here.
Oh, you're muted.
Oh, I'm not able to put you in a different room, but are you there? Can we talk?
Still can't hear you. Hey, Gustavo, I guess you can't talk. You just have to listen.
Michael, are you there?
We can't hear you, though. Well, maybe it's me. Yeah, now I can. Sorry, it was me.
Are you there? Okay, folks, I think it's just me on Facebook Live. So everyone is just off into their waiting rooms right now, or actually into their meeting rooms. And so folks are talking about ways that they can push for ethnic studies and teach in critical and culturally relevant ways in their spaces, and then even trying to figure out ways how to make this accessible to the public. So for those of you that are watching online, if you want, I have a few minutes. So if you want to share anything and write some comments, you're more than welcome to do so. In the meanwhile, I see Patricia, hi Patricia, and Jose Aro, hi. So if you want to join me in our own Facebook room, and if you have any questions, or if you want to contribute to this discussion, please feel free. In the meanwhile, I'll just kind of tell you a little bit about us. My partner, Gabriel Orosco, and I founded Ehecatl Wind Philosophies. And we did that with the intention of helping school districts train their teachers and give them information on the foundations of ethnic studies, the history of it, and what they need to know to establish dialogical spaces in their classroom to make sure that the curriculum is student-centered. Because oftentimes it's not. Oftentimes students, especially students that come from marginalized communities, are not learning about people that look like them throughout history. and they are not learning about social justice issues that are affecting them on a daily basis, right? Because we're all swimming in this water and we don't realize that there's all this water of social injustice around us. We're just in it, and it's become normalized. And so we are dealing with so many barriers, and oftentimes our students and their families are suffering from that, but can't really identify it, much less really analyze it to the core and see how it's tied to institutional and structural racism and sexism and many other isms. And so if we can't do that, if our students and our families and our communities can't do that, then it's going to be extremely difficult for them to be able to address those issues and become civically engaged in their communities so that they can do something about it, right? Oftentimes we are told as people of color to pick ourselves up from our bootstraps, but like Martin Luther King had stated, it's really a terrible thing to tell somebody who doesn't have any boots to begin with. We don't have boots. We don't have those bootstraps, right? Because all of those things were taken away from us through 400 or 500 years of slavery and colonization and living in a patriarchal white supremacist society. And so we want to make sure that we have these discussions with our youth in effective and age-appropriate ways so that they can understand their circumstances and then be able to address the issues that are taking place in their surrounding communities, right? I think that oftentimes we think about racism and social justice issues that are, they're big and vague and they're somewhere out there, but they're not here in our homes when they actually are. And like I said before, they're just normalized. And so it's hard for us to identify and analyze them and then dismantle and disrupt them. And so this is what education needs to become more of. And I do want to give a shout out to all of the people who have been pushing for ethnic studies across the state of California for years now. People that were helping with the model curriculum, including Lupe Carrasco Cardona and many other folks, many other individuals. And this is a fight that we've been fighting for quite some time. But ethnic studies, the fight for ethnic studies didn't start, this decade. It started decades ago, a long, long time ago. And so this is just the ups and the downs, right? And sometimes they try to mask it so that we sometimes we'll mask it with the label of multicultural education, where we learn about heroes, flags, and foods of different peoples and countries, but it's not really hitting the social justice issues that are crippling our communities. And so I'm getting some messages from Jose de Aro on Facebook. How can someone like myself in my position help you and our community to further the goal in your discussion today? Jose, what is your position? What do you do? Then the teachers and us built and designed the lesson. So just in general, for people that are people are coming back. Hi, Nancy.
I am back.
Hi. Did you leave your group or is time up? What happened?
You know what? My phone died. So I'm joining through my laptop.
Oh, okay. Okay. So you're back here with me.
Yes.
The time is up. So I'm going to go ahead and stop breakout rooms. Let me see. All right. So the breakout rooms have about 50 seconds. How are you two doing?
You're doing good.
Okay, good. Yeah, so the breakout rooms are closing. Everybody should be joining us, and then we can have.
I apologize. My computer completely went out when I was going to unmute.
It happens.
I had to run to go get my charger from the car. I'm sorry.
That's okay. We're glad you came back to us. Oh, we can't hear you, Dr. Sleeder.
Yeah, Nancy, the other person in our room, the same thing was happening. Her phone was dying.
I'm sorry.
I've been there.
Okay, so folks will be back in about 10 seconds.
I love the idea of you streaming your classes.
Thank you. It's been so much fun so far. It really has been a lot of fun. My students are enjoying it, and so all the videos are posted on our YouTube page, and folks have been watching them. It's been a great time, and so we just got to, be creative and take advantage of this time that we're Zooming everything.
How many people tune in for a given session? Do you have any idea?
Well, I have more than 30 students per class, and then on Facebook, I have anywhere between 15 to 30 people just kind of watching online and commenting as we go. And so that's live as we're doing now. And then I will post the recording of it on my Facebook page and on Ehecatl Wind Philosophies Facebook page. And so then they can just watch it, whenever they can, because not everybody can catch it while we're streaming live.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Welcome back, everyone. So if anyone wants to, let's see, we had 7 rooms, and in room number 1, there was Angel, Dan, Helen, and Catherine. Anyone from that room want to go ahead and share? What did you all come up with? Because we need solutions.
Anybody from that group want to go ahead and share?
Anyone from any other group?
Well, I mentioned a little bit that some of the pushback that we're seeing are parents. I'm seeing it in where the Santa Barbara School District has implemented a requirement that they're just now implementing, so it's brand new.
Yeah.
But there wasn't a lot of communication with parents about what is in the curriculum or about the approach. And in fact, the first meeting they're having with parents is in 2 weeks, actually next week. So after the curriculum is already underway. And so I think part of the concerns that they're facing are concerns about whether the curriculum or the way it'll be delivered will be, in their view, over politicized. And so their questions are, about both content and what monitoring or oversight there will be of the delivery. And so, my thought was, it'd be really helpful to share some data with parents, both the data about the existing inequities and exclusion, and then the outcomes from these programs that Dr. Sleeder, because I think that people do respond to data. And then I think it's also important to talk about, how the districts are thinking about delivery and how teachers are thinking about delivery, and if there are ways to allay the concerns of these parents. And I think I'm hearing principals, I'm hearing now starting to talk about that and how they're talking about it, seeing some nice approaches, and I hope to see how that develops and how to champion it.
Okay, so I'm hearing to involve students and parents and keep them informed throughout the process, from the beginning and throughout the process, which is very important, and I agree that should be happening. We always make sure that we try our best to, and I know Santa Maria has been doing this too with their community forums, and we've joined them for some of those too, to open it up to the community as we're working through this, right? So that there is community input and parent input. So that's a definite necessity in order to build capacity in the community and support as well. And so everyone has a good understanding. Thank you for that. Room number 2, we have C, Kristen, and Dr. Flores.
Come on, somebody from my group speak up. I speak too much.
I'll share.
All the time. All right.
So coincidentally, the 3 of us work for the same district, and we're on the same ethic and gender studies working committees. One of the things we said we're going to do, yeah, that was tricky, Gabrielle. One of the things we said we're going to do is we're going to apply for that $20,000 grant. Pete has tons of spare time, so he's going to just totally take that on by himself. And apparently we're pushing for an ethnic and gender studies TOSA in our district. We still don't have it.
Okay, so I'm just gonna chime in, and I know this is being recorded, but they can hold me to it. Some other politicians said that too, that you can hold me to it, but hopefully I'll follow through. But for raise your hand if you're from Santa Maria. Santa Maria. All right, Helen, you can raise your hand too. Okay, so For all my, here's what I'm going to do. I'm a district director, so I'm going to remind my folks that are here tonight to don't forget to put in your extra work agreement so that you can get paid for joining this very important workshop, because we want to encourage you to continue to do the work and carry it forward. And I really want to commend you for your dedication and coming on, even though you didn't know that. So thank you for being here. Dr. Sleeder, I want to make I'm going to make a commitment, and my boss from the Center for Leadership, Equity, and Research, Dr. Magdaleno, who you heard from earlier, I'm gonna talk to him about getting clear as an organization to join your petition and the petition you started, and to sign on and provide our support. I think collectively, as individuals and organizations, we can have the power and the momentum to push back. And I would just tell everybody this: we need to act like there's a sense of urgency, because you know, heaven forbid, November 3rd, you know, I'm not counting anything on that day. So I think we all have to act with a sense of urgency and commitment, and you know, it could require something revolutionary. It could require thinking outside the box. It could really be digging deep into our belief system. So we're with you, Dr. Sleeder. Ken, I hope I didn't overstep as a director, but you're the director. So I think you and I are on the same wavelength, though.
Yeah, I was already going to say that the answer is yes. So yeah, you do a good job, Pete.
Veronica, I think you're on mute.
Thank you. I was just thanking Santa Maria, my hometown. Thank you so much. Much love to all of you. Room number 3, we had Gabriel, Gustavo, and Liliana. Let's have either Gustavo or Liliana speak, or maybe both of you.
Well, can I just talk a little bit about what Peter just said? Regardless of who's going to be the president, the work needs to continue. It's not going to be easy with whatever choice, right? It's still going to be hard work. And one of the things that we're trying to, at my site, what we're trying to do is not only just have an ethnic studies, but a pathway. And so I'm part of the Puente project. And so I've been working with one of my colleagues, Johnny Gonzalez. He started a pathway out in Coachella. And so I was sharing with Gabriel, like, with us, we have the 9th and 10th grade literature. We talked about in 9th grade, our students, primarily read Chicano writers. And then in 10th grade, we mix it up with different perspectives, lack for a better word, multicultural literature. And then this year, our first group, we were supposed to start them with race and gender and US history, but COVID just blew it all out of the water. And so we're just trying to keep our program intact. And then their senior year, they'll take Chicano studies. So I've been doing I was at TOSA for 6 years. They took Chicano studies away in 2010 because of all the budget crap that was going on. And this was the first program to be chopped. I left that high school and I went to the other high school. I worked my butt off as a TOSA. And then when it was time for me to go back in the classroom, I told my boss, I want Chicano studies back. And she's now in heaven. I always thank her for here's this white lady who believed in Chicano studies. And so for the past 5 years, we brought back the program even stronger, and we connected with Puente. So I'm proud of the people that I'm working with, and it's allowed me to meet other folks like Veronica and Gabriel. But we're still at the bottom. I mean, just barely like a little drop in the bucket with the support that we need, to move forward. I envision, this is why it pushed me to get my doctorate degree, right? Because, when you have your doctorate degree, people are going to listen. And so I've been working hard at that. And I want to see this at all our high schools. So that's just, my little take. Thank you.
Thank you, Gustavo. Yes, definitely pathways. Let's build those across the districts as well. We shouldn't just settle for one class and it be an elective, right? It should be a requirement, and then develop a pathway on top of that. Liliana, did you want to add to that? Because I know Rialto is also okay. Rialto is also going to work towards a pathway, and hopefully Santa Maria as well. Okay, so room number 4, we have Dr. Duncan, Ken Magdaleno, and Nalik. Go ahead and share.
Well, we had a nice time reacquainting ourselves. I met Ken many years ago, and Nalik works in Rialto. I recently retired from Rialto, but the substance focused on how students respond to hearing stories that are pertinent to their lives, the lives of their family, but things that have never been discussed in an academic context. And then to be able to define terms, to have examples, both historic and contemporary, that they can understand and say, hey, that's part of the real life I live. That's part of the real life that my family has lived. It changes their attitude about learning, about knowledge and education. And what else does that but ethnic studies?
Thank you. Anyone else from that group want to add anything? Okay, so the next group is Jonathan, Marika, and Maritza.
I can talk. This is Marika from Orange County, and we talked about doing the work every day. So however you can get the work in, do the work, share the counter narratives, build the relationships, and do the work of ethnic studies every day. We talked a little bit about our fears about, what's to come. And I think that we need to leverage our networks. We talked about building networks and sitting in networks of ethnic studies teachers, and really leveraging those local stories. So doing the work.
Thank you so much, Marika. And also, if you all check the chat, I did just share a shared Google Doc that you have access to. If you can please jot down while we're speaking to the other groups, listening to the other groups, if you can please jot down your name and your email so I can email this, the recording to you, and also Dr. Sleeder's slides. And then you'll see underneath that, if you wanna include any links to resources or ideas or whatnot, there's space for that too. So go ahead and open that up. So you can fill that out, or at least have your tab open and it doesn't disappear when we say goodbye. Okay, so the next group, I don't want to mispronounce your name, Doran and Ricardo.
Doran, would you like to chime in, or should I jump in? I was really, it was a pleasure. It was only Doran and I. We're a small but mighty group. And Doran shared with me the work that he's doing in Irvine to democratize or to bring that ethnic studies lens to STEM, and to prepare teachers to be STEM educators. So it was a reminder that some people think of ethnic studies as that's the realm of social sciences or English, but no, it's like in the sciences, it's in math, it's in everything that we do, right? So and he also, I liked how we talked about how a lot of the educators in the program, for example, a lot of them are Latino educators, in STEM, which makes my heart happy, because growing up, I didn't see a lot of Latino teachers until I went to the university. And we had the conversation around the fact that, unfortunately, there's not a lot of diversity still in the teaching profession. It's still about 80% white. And unfortunately, many of my white colleagues, and most of my colleagues in general, haven't taken the time to think about implicit bias and how they perpetuate, sometimes white supremacy when we don't decolonize ourselves and our curriculum. So it was a really fascinating conversation about connecting what our students are learning about in the curriculum to the sciences, and just like how we inspire each other. Like as I was hearing Doran speak, I just felt so like blessed to be in this space where we get to network, which is what I think Marika was bringing out, right? Let's continue to empower our networks to stay in contact with each other. Hopefully some of us can connect as a result of this and stay in touch, because this work is draining. Where we're under attack straight up from the highest levels, we're under attack, right? Literally from the president of the United States. Not my president, but from the top, right? So how do we come together to really support each other's work so that we don't burn out, so that we don't stop the work, because that's what they want us to do. They want us to quit. That's part of the name of the game, right? Is they want us to just kind of like give up because it's so hard. But I'm not going to give up, and I'm re-energized thanks to you also. Thank you.
Thank you, Ricardo, for those palabras. So we are coming to an end, and I would like to just ask Dr. Sleeder if you have any last words or comments for us. Unmute.
No, this is a really exciting discussion. And for me, it's just really interesting to hear from everybody and what people are grappling with. And I love these kinds of discussions because it's like we can problem solve together. So I appreciate being a part of it.
Thank you so very much for being here with us, Dr. Sleeder, and for sharing your knowledge and your wisdom and all of your experience with us, and for supporting us as we're still, in the classrooms or administrators or whatnot. Thank you so much. And to all of you, thank you for taking time on your Friday afternoon. I'm sure you're all beat and just want to like be done and check out. But this just goes to show how much you understand how important this work is. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you for having the heart and the spirit to fight for our students, for our youth, and for the future generations yet to come.
Yeah, and I'll echo that sentiment. I want you to know that Dr. Sleeder, we're so honored to have you here. And what I love about Dr. Sleeder is how authentic she is, and she's so down to earth, and she's so honest and forthcoming. So I really appreciate you, Dr. Sleeder, and all of you that are here, and all of you that want to make a difference and have an impact, because that's what Veronica and I want to do. That's what we're trying to do. But we have to come together collectively and bring our voices together, as well as locally. And I appreciate Dr. Magdaleno bringing that up, because we do have to get involved locally, because that's where local school boards, and I'll be honest with you, I am a school board member right now. This would be my last year. I'll be done in December. But I would tell you that that's where we have to locally go to your school boards, go to those superintendents, and start there, because when we all come together statewide, like we're really big. But when we go back to our local districts, like brother Gustavo said, he's one TOSA by himself. So that's where we have to duplicate ourselves in our own districts, right? So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Yes, everyone, have a great weekend. Thank you for being with us, and let's stay in touch. Make sure you give us your contact info on the Google Doc, all right? Peace and love, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good night.